Hello loves, now this is a different kind of video than what I usually do, but I thought it'd be good to start sharing a bit more about my life in Korea, including what I had been doing for the last 2 years. And that was studying in South Korea for free and actually getting paid to study. So how did I do it? Well, it was all thanks to the Global Korea Scholarship. This video will have 4 main parts, which you can choose to watch thanks to YouTube's chapter function. So you can watch the parts you are most interested in, or just watch the whole thing. In the first part, I'll go over what that scholarship is, as in what's the purpose of the scholarship, what are the benefits, the restrictions, etc. In part 2, I'll go over the forms and documents you need to fill out, including my experience of writing the dreaded personal statement and statement of purpose, the mistakes I made, and also the tips I learned along the way. Part 3 covers some advice on how to prepare for the interview if your university requires it. And then part 4 is a little bit about me as a candidate and why I had chosen my specific university. Keep in mind that I got this scholarship via the university track, which I'll explain what that is, and I got it for my master's degree. So this video is ideal for those who are aiming to get the same type of degree through the same track. But I think any interested candidate could gain something from this. I also know that there will probably be a flood of people asking more about the scholarship, so I ask that you leave any questions in the comments of this video. I don't check my Instagram or TikTok often enough to reply on those sites, so this is the best place for me to see your questions and reply. If I can help, of course I will, but if I don't know the answer, I will tell you honestly, and hopefully someone else can read the comment and help out. If you want to stop this video now and do other research, I recommend using search terms such as GKS and also KGSP, which stands for Korean Government Scholarship Program, because that's the scholarship's former name, and many people have gone into great depth about it on their own YouTube channels or blogs. I also recommend finding Facebook groups related to the scholarship, because you'll find a lot of people sharing information there as well. And of course, information is power. Now, why should you listen to me of all people? Well, first, hi, I'm Cindy, but my handle is Sinlamyeon on all my social media platforms because I think it's funny. I not only have this YouTube channel, but I also share daily life and things to do in Korea on TikTok, and sometimes I post stuff on Instagram. I would love it if you guys followed me everywhere. More importantly though, I was one of the recipients in 2019, and I was one of the 5 Americans chosen for university track to get my master's degree. So I got to attend my now alma mater, Ewha Womans University, where I studied international business. I had prepared for a very, very long time to get the scholarship, and now I can share what I learned with you. Keep in mind that this scholarship has a lot of rules and exceptions, and people have so many unique circumstances that the most I can provide is a kind of general explanation and tips, and it's up to you to read the guidelines very carefully. And with that, let's get to the good stuff, starting with what is the Global Korea Scholarship? This scholarship was started with the purpose of providing international students with opportunities to study at higher educational institutions in Korea, which will enhance international exchange and deepen mutual friendships between Korea and participating countries. In 2021, this scholarship was offered to students from 145 countries, but this number changes a bit every year, so it's important to check and make sure your country is listed. And you can find all that information on the studyinkorea.go.kr website. There you can also check out which universities and majors are covered by the scholarship. Note that I put the name of the 2021 files that you can refer to throughout this video because the 2022 files won't be available until February. It's important to note that there are actually different types of this scholarship. They can largely be divided into GKSU, which is for the undergraduate program, and GKSG, which is for the graduate programs such as master's, PhD, or research program. The scholarship includes all the years of studying for that program, so for example, 4 years to study for a bachelor's degree, 2 years to study for a master's degree, etc. And it also includes 1 year of Korean language studies, with the exception of the research program. However, if you have a TOPIK of 5 or 6, which is the test of proficiency in Korean, you can skip the language year and go directly into your studies. As I mentioned before, for the graduate program, the files and announcement of the scholarship don't occur until February. And then, at least for what I know about university track, each university has their own deadline of when to submit all the documents. If all goes as planned, you'll be in Korea by August. Now, one of the reasons why this scholarship is so competitive is because it offers a lot of financial support. You can pause to look at this table of all the monetary benefits, But there are a couple I want to point out in particular. Firstly, they provide airfare to Korea, but if you're like me and already living here, you will not get that flight. They do write that somewhere on the site or in the guidelines, but it's something to keep in mind if you're currently in Korea. Second, GCAS provides a monthly stipend for you to live off of. However, you are not allowed to work during the semester to supplement the stipend. Depending on your spending habits, where you want to live, etc., this money might not stretch very far. I know some scholars who were able to save and others who weren't, so it's really important to figure out your budget prior to coming. For example, I know some scholars who lived in the dorms because their university offered discounts to GKS recipients, and that helped. So it's also important to choose your future university carefully. I also want to point out that the medical insurance policies for students in Korea are changing right now. I don't know what the rules will be in the future, but at the time I was studying, I paid around 40,000 won per month, I think, for Korea's national health insurance, and GKS reimbursed me. And on top of that, we had to pay for an extra private health insurance fee, which wasn't very high. I have a feeling GKS will keep covering the cost of medical insurance, but I just wanted to let you know that it's not 20,000 won anymore, and GKS does acknowledge that in a different part of the website. Next, the tuition part had initially confused me, but all your tuition costs will be covered, so you don't have to worry about it at all. And finally, the Korean Proficiency Grant. If you get a TOEIC 5 or 6, you get an extra 100,000 won a month added to your stipend, which helps a lot. But also keep in mind, once your TOEIC is expired, you do not get the extra money. So for example, for myself, I didn't have time to renew my TOEIC, so for my final semester, I didn't get this grant and it was very sad. Also, keep in mind that the time the monetary benefits are given seem to vary by university, so treat the timeline as more of an example than the exact rule. On top of all this money and free education, there are some extra benefits to getting the scholarship if you want to stay and work in Korea after graduation. So during your studies as a GCAS recipient, you first get the D41 visa, which is a language visa, and then you get the D27 visa. And it's this visa that allows you to get some special treatment when you change visas later. So for example, if you are trying to get the E71 visa, a type of professional working visa, because you're coming from the D27, you only need to fulfill the minimum requirements of this visa. And even better, you don't have to worry about the number of Korean workers of the prospective company. Under Korean law, there has to be 5 Korean employees for every foreigner they sponsor, so it's pretty hard to find a job that can sponsor you, even if you're qualified. Having the D27, on the other hand, can bypass that. Another type of visa you might be interested down the road after graduation is the F5 visa, the permanent residency visa. There are many different types, but if you complete a master's degree in Korea and live here for 3 years after graduation, with at least one of those years spent working as a regular employee in a company, you can apply for the F510. Usually, you need to have earned at least GNI, which nowadays is close to like 40 million won a year. But if you've held the D27, you're exempt from that requirement. Finally, if you're a scholar from one of the 22 countries that participated and aided in the Korean War, your university can recommend you to NEED, which is the institute that governs the GKS program, and they might select you to receive the F27 visa after you graduate. This is a long-term residency visa based on a point system that allows you to work quite freely and without any type of visa sponsorship. You basically hold and earn your own visa. If you're interested in a video about this particular visa and the point system, please let me know and I'll whip up another presentation about it. I also want to mention that I heard the F27 is changing again in such a way that GCAS scholar or not, students who graduated from a master's program in Korea can get the F27 right after graduation if they have a job contract. But I need to fully research that before saying for certain if that's the case. Now, I said all this nice stuff about this visa, but unfortunately, not everyone is allowed to apply. The scholarship has quotas for the number of scholars accepted by country, and not all countries are extended the scholarship. Secondly, you have to be a citizen of that country. You also have to prove that you and your parents are not Korean citizens, unless it's a very specific circumstance that you should look up in the guidelines. This scholarship is for international students, and they do not consider Koreans who live abroad as international students. Not 100% sure why the parents' citizenships are important, but it is. Another restriction has to do with age. For example, the master's program, you have to be under 40 years old. So for example, for the 2021 GKS graduate program, you had to have been born after September 1st, 1981. And you need to have at least a bachelor's degree, but it can't have been from a university in Korea with some exceptions. It's fine if you were an exchange student here, you just can't have a degree from here. I have to stress how competitive the scholarship is, and so they have minimum GPA requirements. These scores, like I said, are the absolute minimum, and you're going to have to find some other ways to shine if you don't have a high GPA. Finally, you have to be healthy and not taking any illegal substances. I would not even think about lying or hiding any illness or drug use, because not only do you fill out a personal medical assessment, if you're selected, you have to do a very, and I mean very, thorough medical check before you arrive in Korea, and you do another one after you arrive as well. So if you have completely fallen in love with all the benefits and none of the restrictions apply to you, you now can choose between 2 tracks to apply for the scholarship and the university or universities you want to try and attend. The 2 tracks are Embassy Track and University Track, and each have their own advantages. If you choose the Embassy Track, you apply via the Korean Embassy in your own country. There are more designated countries in this track. For example, in 2021, there were 145 countries listed. And you can pick 3 universities through this track. So if you feel more comfortable having options and maybe picking a safety school, this might be the route for you. The university track, on the other hand, has way less designated countries. In 2021, there were only 76. In other words, for some countries, you can apply only through the embassy track. And the scariest part of this track is that you can only pick one university. So you are putting all your hopes and dreams into getting accepted into that specific university. Another thing to note is that the embassy track allows for more scholars per country to be accepted. For example, if we look at the American quotas, there were 15 spots for embassy track, but only 5 for university track. So why did I choose university track? Well, there was only one university I wanted to attend at that time, and by going through the university track, I thought I could write an extremely detailed personal statement and statement of purpose geared towards that major and that university. I also thought that my grades and my experience in Korea made me a really strong candidate. Another plus is that the process is a little more streamlined when you go through the university track. The university chooses you first and recommends you to NEED, and then if NEED decides you'd be a good scholar, you're in. So that concluded part 1, and if I have convinced you to go through the university track, then it's time to tell you all about the forms and documents you're going to need to fill out and how I recommend you go about doing so. It's actually not all that much to collect, which you can pause and look at here and here, but it does take a lot of time to get everything and write the perfect statements. Remember that you can only fill out the documents in Korean or English, and the forms will tell you which language you can use and when. Also, your English name has to match your passport, and the documents all have to be originals. If they aren't, the copies have to be notarized, apostilled, or have consular confirmation, depending on how that works in your country. The most important thing to remember is this: any documents you give are not going to be returned. So don't go sending your original degree or anything like that. Now that we have that covered, let's go over some of the basic forms. The first is the application checklist, which helps you keep track of which documents you have prepared, which ones are required, and which ones are optional. The next one is called Form 1, Global Korea Scholarship Application. It's just a form with a basic checklist and your personal information. So in my case, I selected the university track, then general, liberal arts, and master's degree. And then I filled out the middle part of Form 1 with my information as well. Here, I want to highlight the last box about language abilities. I really encourage you to study Korean beforehand and take the Korean language exam called the TOPIK. Having a TOPIK 3 gives you some additional points on your application, and so does having high English test scores. But even if you get a 1 or 2 on the TOPIK, I still think it helps because it shows you're actively trying to learn the language. If you get the scholarship and enter the Korean language year, by the end of it, you have to have at least a TOPIK 3 anyways, so you might as well start studying now. In the next part of the form, you write down information related to your academic achievements, and you write the name of the university, division, department, and major that you are applying for. Remember that for university track, you only write down 1. Moving on, in this part of Form 1, I had a little bit of trouble. You see, I had attended a community college first, and then transferred to university for my bachelor's degree. So I didn't know how to write down my GPA. I contacted NEED and was told to input it all on the same line. So in the end, I wrote down the GPAs from my time at community college in the first year section, and then the GPAs from my university in the second, third, and fourth year section. And then the last part of Form 1 is pretty easy to fill out. It's just any work experience, time spent in Korea, or any scholarship awards granted to you by Korean institutions. Moving on to Form 2, the personal statement. This took me months to write. I am not even joking. It is really difficult to write a statement that hits all the target points, listed in a way that flows easily, is easy to read, is impactful, eloquent, and impressive all at the same time. I was lucky enough to be able to write it in my native language of English, so I can only imagine how hard it is to write in your second or third language. But here are some tips I can give you based on my own experience. One of the things I made sure to write about is my connection to Korea. A fun fact about this scholarship is people drop out because they end up not adjusting or not liking life in Korea. So if you have any personal connection to living in Korea, Korean culture, the language, I would try to add that in the statement. If you've never lived here or know very little about Korea, then at least show you're willing to learn and have some ability to adapt in new environments, whether that be abroad in a different country or maybe in just some unfamiliar situations. Also, try to figure out why studying in Korea, of all places, is important to you. Yes, the scholarship itself and being able to study for free is a huge advantage, but is there anything that studying in Korea can offer you that your home country or other countries can't? Next, I also wrote about the major I was interested in and why I was pursuing a different major for my bachelor's degree. This might not be the case for everybody, but I had no experience related to my future degree at the time, so I had to do a lot of research to prove both to myself and the university why this field was the right fit for me. I also explained how my past degree and extracurricular activities were going to aid me in this new field. On the surface, my previous major had little to do with my concentration of international business. I had to find threads that connected them to each other and explain how my bachelor's degree was actually an asset and even vital to getting my master's degree, as it gave me the skill set needed to earn that advanced degree. If you're coming from a different educational background, you're going to have to figure out how your undergraduate studies relates to your future studies. Another seeming disadvantage turned advantage was my work experience. I had been out of school for about 7 years working in a different field for much of that time. I had to think outside the box and look for abilities I cultivated through my work experience that would allow me to transition to my new field. One more thing I found to be important was adding a section about why I chose my university, as in why that major, why that university. So, for example, it'd be really hard to explain why you want to study law at a university known for, let's say, art. So you need to understand why that major is important for your future and why going to that university is important. In a nutshell, find your strengths, find your reasons, and spin any experience you can into a positive one. Form 3 is another form that people need to spend a lot of time writing and rewriting. This form is the statement of purpose, and it now includes 3 parts. The first part is the language study plan, which didn't exist when I applied, but I can understand why they added this section. As I mentioned, if you don't have TOEIC 5 or 6, you need to attend the language training year, and you have to earn at least a TOEIC 3 by the end of it, although this might vary with your university and major. There are people who were not able to pass this stage of the program, so you have to be very confident that you're going to be able to learn this language or any language that your major requires. If you're starting from zero, you are going to have to come up with a solid and convincing plan for this section. Now, I do have experience with the second and third sections of this form and some tips to offer. The second section has to do with your goal of study and a study plan. If your university or major requires a thesis, you can talk about your plans for it in this section. My major didn't require a thesis, so at first I was a little stuck worrying about what to write. In the end, I studied the curriculum, read the syllabi from all the classes, and created a grid that included what classes I was planning to take each semester, and then explained why I had to take these courses, and how they would help me gain the necessary knowledge to enter my new field. I also went into a deeper explanation of why I had to study at my university and the goals I would achieve while studying there. Like I said, I did mention this lightly in my personal statement, but it's here that I went all in. The final section of Form 3 is your future plan after study. I can only offer 2 tips for this part. The first is that you are going to have to describe a solid career or study path that directly relates to your major. Obviously, if your dream job has nothing to do with your major, that's going to be hard to explain. Again, if you can make it so that the scholarship and studying specifically in Korea is going to help you in your future career, that would be amazing. My next tip is a bit controversial. Remember that the purpose of the scholarship is to deepen the friendship between your home country and Korea. Some people think it's best to write about how you'll return to your home country so that whatever impressive future you have will make people look upon Korea positively, kind of strengthening its soft power. Others will talk about how they want to stay in Korea after and what they will end up doing thanks to the scholarship, helping Korea in some way. I kind of went the latter route, mentioning my future field and that I wanted to work in Korea, but I also explained how my work will help improve the connection between my home country and Korea, with myself acting as a bridge of sorts between the two. Now, this worked for me, but I don't know if you can spin your future plans that way, so try to think about it. Another form you have to be careful with is Form 5. Yes, we are skipping Form 4, it's not needed for the master's program. Form 5 is the recommendation letter. You have to have at least 2 recommendation letters, depending on the university, preferably from former professors, but you can get it from a superior in your workplace. My first tip is to read this recommendation letter form super carefully, because if you or the person writing the letter do something incorrectly, like not sealing it properly, then you might lose your chance at the scholarship. My second tip is to ask for this letter months in advance. Remember that the announcement for the scholarship is in February, so you only have a short amount of time to submit all documents. So it's a really tight deadline for you to ask your professors suddenly for a thoughtfully written recommendation letter. You can use a letter that is, and I quote, dated within a year from the very last date of the application deadline. Finally, let me talk about a mistake that I made. This form didn't mention if it had to be in Korean or English, and I thought it would be really cool to have one of my Korean professors write my recommendation letter in Korean. The problem was that I was applying for a program all in English. So when I went to deliver all the documents in person to the university, because I live in Korea, they told me they couldn't accept the Korean recommendation letter because some of the professors don't speak Korean. So I scrambled. I had a week to find a new recommendation letter, and luckily I was able to get one, or I would have missed the deadline and I would have had to wait a whole year. So I'm not sure about other majors, but just be careful. The last 2 forms are super simple. Form 7, again skipping some forms, they aren't for the master's program. Form 7 is just a form where you agree to follow all the rules related to the scholarship. If you win the scholarship, you enter Korea as kind of a representative of your home country, and so you have to promise to conduct yourself in a certain manner. And that brings us to the final form, Form 8, the Personal Medical Assessment Form. As I said before, don't try to hide any information from this form, as you will have to undergo 2 medical checks after being selected as a scholar. So now that we've gone over all the forms, let's move on to Part 3. Welcome to Part 3, the university interview. I heard that not all universities have interviews, some just make their selections based off your documents. But if you're watching this section, then your university has one and you want to prepare. Biggest tip, don't take the interview lightly. Prepare. Do as much research as possible. Now, based on my own experience at Ewha Womans University, I suggest researching the following. First, read as much as you can about your major, especially if you're someone like me that is changing their major. I was lucky that my school put up the entire curriculum online, and then I could look up all the classes, all the syllabi, all the books they use, etc. So I had what I thought was a really solid idea of the courses I wanted to take. However, make sure the curriculum is up to date, perhaps by contacting the school, because some of the classes I wanted to take ended up not being available. I would also research some jobs that you're interested in, and maybe some dream companies that match your major, to show that you have a solid idea of what your future might look like. For example, I talked at length about corporate social responsibility in my statement of purpose, and so I was asked questions about that during my interview, and was even asked to give an example of a company and its CSR programs. So if you wrote about something in your statements, but you can't talk about it during your interview, that might be a problem. You should also do some research into the university and the department you want to be a part of. It would be great if you learn about the history of the university and your department, any of its achievements or unique points, things of that sort. I think if you show how much you're already in love with the university and how proud you'll be to be a student there, the interviewers will feel that love. But remember, don't just focus on what the university can offer you, but what you can offer the university. For example, how can you help your fellow students? Will you perhaps join the student council? Basically, think about how your time there will make a difference or perhaps even make the university a better place. My last piece of advice for the interview is to learn about your future professors. I'm not saying stalk them, but just learn about them. You can start by checking out the courses and the faculty page to see which professors you might end up having classes with or share your fields of interest. Also look for any articles they may have written or any of their interviews. And nowadays, a lot of them have social media like a YouTube channel or Instagram, such as one of my former professors who you can check out by clicking the link. You never know, one of them might end up being on the interview panel. If you follow these tips, you're going to look like an expert, trust me. Now, welcome to the final part. If you've reached this stage, you're probably wondering a little bit about me and what I brought to the proverbial table. So I've added a little bit about myself to this presentation. For me, choosing a scholarship in Korea was an easy choice because it's my second home. I've been living in Korea on and off since 2011, and I have a high-ish TOEIC score, even though my speaking is admittedly not so great. I also finished the KIIP, which is a program that teaches Korean language as well as culture, law, history, etc. for those who wish to gain residency in Korea. It's a lot of work, but one of the major advantages of completing this program is that the certificate doesn't expire, and in the eyes of immigration at least, it's equivalent to like a TOEIC level 5. In terms of my education, I had graduated from a high-ranking university, and by combining the community college and university GPA, it turned out to be a 3.98, and I graduated with a bachelor's in linguistics. I think my weakest point that I had to reframe into an advantage was my work experience, as I was previously an English teacher in Korea. Like a lot of teachers, I decided I wanted to change careers, so I had to look at my teaching experience from more of a business perspective. So I knew I wanted to study in Korea, and in the end I chose Ewha Womans University. But why did I choose it? First, Ewha has a really low faculty to student ratio for my department. My largest class had about 20 students, and my smallest class had around 8, I believe. It was a really intimate experience, and so I got to know some of my professors really well, and they took care to learn about me too. I also took advantage of these small classes by asking a lot of questions and gaining a better understanding of the material than I would have if the class had been larger. Ewha is also known for its Graduate School of International Studies, and its International Studies program is conducted entirely in English. For people like me, whose native language is English, that is a huge plus as I could absorb the information more easily. But I do wish that they had some courses geared towards more learning Korean for business settings, as it would have been really helpful for those like myself who want to work in Korea after. That's why right now I'm basically self-studying to do interviews and to prepare myself for work in a company in Korea. Another cool part about this department is that they offer special certifications. So when I graduated, I not only earned my degree, but also certifications in international public relations and global social responsibility. I also really liked that my department had a really diverse student body. There weren't many Koreans in my classes, but I met people from all around the world, which helped me understand new perspectives and taught me how to work in a more international setting, which matched with my concentration well. Another plus for me is that it's technically an all-female university. I really liked that feeling of a sisterhood and hoped we'd build deeper connections as women facing the male-dominated world of business. There's also an added bonus that there's some sort of weight and recognition and respect when you tell people that you've gone to Ewha Womans University and you're now an ide naon 여자. The reason why I said it's technically an all-female university is because men are allowed to attend classes, but only as an exchange student. So these are just some of the reasons why I chose Ewha, and if you are curious to learn more about my university, then I urge you to check out their website. And thus ends this very long presentation. I hope it didn't bore you, and I truly hope that all of you are able to succeed in getting this scholarship. And that's it for now. I would love it if you liked, commented, and subscribed to see what my future holds here in Korea.